Hi, everybody. My name is Bryce Rankins, and that's Brian Romero.
Yeah, that's me.
And you're listening to episode 5 of the Starlight Archive. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Starlight Archive, the best Griffin High Republic podcast this side of Headsall. Today is our spoilery episode.
Spoilers.
So this is your official warning. If you don't want to hear about Phase 1, Wave 1 of the High Republic,
get out now.
Go.
Just
turn it on.
Just go.
I know you're scrambling for your
You're
phone
great.
right
You're
now.
cool.
Go.
But just go.
Okay, you got it? And, all right, bye. See you later. Okay, now that they're gone.
Yeah.
Okay, so actually this entire episode is exclusively dedicated to our love of Boss Nass.
Mm-hmm.
Boss Nasty, as they call him on the streets, is the coolest Gungan, part of a different race of Gungans, technically, like a subset of Gungans than Jar Jar.
Extra strong,
only
extra
two of
wise.
them even know about them.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, only two of them know. But only two of them are even known, like, and named.
Yeah.
In the canon.
And who's the other one?
I don't remember his name. It's like Algarada or something like that.
Is that a thing?
There's one other one.
What?
There's one other Gungan. I think Star Wars Explained was like, why does Boss Nass not look like that?
Because he's Boss frickin' Nass.
But apparently it's a different type of Gungan, and they're like an older Gungan.
Whoa.
That, like, there's not a lot of them anymore, but canon, only one of them has appeared elsewhere. And the only one that's ever been actually seen in any media at all has been Boss Nass.
Wait, why are we doing a podcast on High Republic when we could be talking about Gungans?
I know, the whole time. Okay, we should probably talk about Gungans. We are actually not. We should talk about
I know.
Gungans.
I want to.
No, we need to not talk about Gungans. We're instead going to talk about Wave 1, Phase 1, High Republic.
Well, I don't want to do that anymore.
Well, I'm sorry, buddy, but that's the contract. We signed it. We signed it. That deal with the devil that said you can have an okay sounding podcast. Weren't you there for that?
No.
Yeah, it was a real nice guy. Sheev something or other.
Reminds me of that Metalocalypse episode where they make a deal with the devil, but they're all like lawyers, and he's like, I'm gonna need a notary, and then Murderface is like, I'm a notary. I'll have to think on this. And he disappears. They're like, we can't even make a deal with the devil. So good.
Not sure how much of this is staying in, but I will say, today we're talking about Wave 1, Phase 1 of the High Republic.
Oh, yeah.
And that includes The Light of the Jedi novel by Charles Soule, Into the Dark by Claudia Gray,
Test of Courage.
A Test of Courage by Justina Ireland, the Star Wars The High Republic comic book through Marvel, Star Wars The High Republic Adventures through IDW at the time, now printed through Dark Horse.
Yes.
At the time of recording this. And
the High Republic Adventures one shot.
The High Republic Adventures well, it's not really a High Republic Adventures one shot, is it?
It's a Star Wars Adventures.
Star Wars Adventures Tales of Villainy number 6, and only half of that book.
Yeah.
And 2 stories that take place in Starlight Stories.
Yeah.
And we're going to try to jam through that real fast. But here's basically what you missed on Glee. So, Light of the Jedi opens up with a ship called the Legacy Run. It's captained by a woman named Hedda Cassette. And Hedda Cassette loves her ship.
Yeah.
She has been managing and running this freighter that transports people in a good way to the frontier so that they can go live their life. She's basically the Oregon Trail. And
no dysentery allowed.
No dysentery allowed, and no hunting minigame, which arguably I'm not sure if hyperspace makes up for that. But
I don't want to hunt Purrgil, though.
Yeah, you cannot hunt Purrgil.
No,
you cannot do that. But she also has a little boy on the ship who's on his way. He's a bit of a scamp. His name's Serge Eucarian, and she's off doing her thing, shipping people to the frontier and helping them start a new life. And you get a real sense that there's some pride in this. And then she dies.
Yeah, the whole ship just blows up.
So basically, a ship comes out of nowhere.
In hyperspace.
In hyperspace, shows up like alongside their ship, the Legacy Run, and just
crashes into it.
So now you have a ship and a half exiting hyperspace with no come to a stop.
Nope.
They are just flying out of hyperspace at near light speed.
Yeah.
We are going so fast that anything like a small square meter box could devastate a city given the impact because, small rocks still make big craters.
Big craters.
So suddenly on this planet called Hetzal, which happens to be an agriculture planet because you got to have a farm planet. We have a sand planet and a city planet and a forest planet and a forest-based planet. And now we're going to have farm planet.
Farm planet.
So there's 2 moons. They got the rooted moon and the fruited moon. And there's some cool guys named Mervyn Getter and Vel Karan, and they run kind of the lookout station. And they're like, hey, nothing ever happens in this place. And you start to get to know them, and you start to kind of like get a feel for what they're doing. And then suddenly they see the emergencies coming out, and they die.
Yeah. Also, rewinding just a little bit, I love that trope of just like a little base or just a little like outpost that are just like, I'm so bored, nothing ever happens here. All of a sudden, everything always happens there. Like, that's...
Sir, don't you know that you're in a Star Wars?
Yeah.
You silly goose. Have you not seen that your planet has 1 biome? I'm sorry, but if you live on a planet and there's only 1 biome on the planet, you're in a Star Wars.
Yeah.
So there's the rooted moon, the fruited moon. Rooted because it's a root
Rooted
cellar.
and fruited.
Rooted and fruited. Man, this whole podcast is rooted and fruited. You got that podcast ready? Rooted and fruited, baby. So the rooted moon is basically your root cellar. Not a whole lot of light. Tidally locked to be generally fairly dark. Much more for your onions and your potatoes. Space onions and space potatoes. And then...
Space carrots, too.
Space carrots, space turnips, space beets. Actually, the space beets are wherever Figure and Dan is coming from.
Well, obviously.
That's on the full biome for Jizz Planet.
Yeah.
It's just all one Jizz nightclub. And then the fruited moon, which is your forests, your trees, your agriculture in the daylight, the outside plants. That's the fruited moon. So
space oranges and space apples.
Oranges. Yeah, that's where your space orchard is. And suddenly there are giant chunks of ship flying, emerging, if you will, out of hyperspace directly at this place. And so they do what you do in an emergency when you live in that galaxy far, far away.
You freak out.
But one of you calls the Jedi.
Yeah.
And so they call up the Jedi, they call up the Republic, and they're like, you've got to send help. And so Jedi everywhere
are like, okay, we're on it. And luckily, a few were close.
That's the nice thing about Jedi not all being centered on Coruscant, is they're everywhere, which means when there's an emergency, they don't have to worry about flying out all the way from the core world.
Those call times are solid.
They can get there very quickly and efficiently because there's temples everywhere and they're living at the temples everywhere, which is good. It's very convenient to have them nearby.
But even more convenient, Avar Kriss is palling around on a spaceship called the Third Horizon, and she actually arrives fairly quickly.
Because she's nearby.
Cool.
Avar Kriss is awesome. She is noble. She is beauty. She is grace. She is Miss United Space. And she is... If you played Knights of the Old Republic, you know what this force power kind of is already because it's something from the old canon, but she basically has battle meditation.
Yeah.
She's Bastila. She even kind of looks like Bastila, if we're going to be perfectly honest. But she is...
Well, sort of.
She is I feel like she could also be voiced by the same woman who voiced Bastila, and it would make perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
Avar Kriss can commune with
other Jedi.
Tons of other Jedi and like feel them through the Force and then kind of center all of them so that they are of one goal. Not necessarily of one mind. She's not, hive minding them, but she's very much channeling all of them so that they can all use the Force together and be properly coordinated. And so that they don't have to work super hard to be connected to their fellow Jedi because she's kind of weaving those threads.
Yeah. She's kind of guiding. So say if there's a space battle, she can kind of guide all of the Jedi to fight whatever big old spaceship's going on.
Yeah. She has the ability to kind of get everyone, that feeling you get in the Force where you go, oh, I probably should go over there. She has the ability to go, hey, this is the Force. It's saying this to all of you. So she's very much a unifier. This is also one of the first people where we start talking about how do they view the Force, because everyone kind of experiences the Force differently, and we don't really talk about that a whole bunch in other canon, which something I really like about the High Republic in general is that she views the Force and feels the Force as if it is a song.
Yeah.
So she's less like she's weaving threads, and it's more like she's a conductor, like leading an orchestra. All that is to say, Avar Kriss is very much this orchestrator, if you'll pardon the pun, of all of the other Jedi in coordinating this effort on Hetzal.
Yeah.
And Hetzal is in a panic naturally, but all these other ships, any ships that are out just around the planet are now getting pelted and just blowing up. So they're like, everyone has to go. Like, this is while Lena So is still very much trying to get the Starlight Beacon off the ground.
Yeah.
And so this is this huge disaster that she's really worried about, because this is going to kind of put a damper on everything if something bad happens. But also Lena So cares about people.
Right.
She is the first to be like, I don't care what my public image is.
She's a good lady.
That the Republic thrives. And if everyone is reeling from a disaster, then we're never going to be able to unify and expand the Republic so that we can properly help the people we need to help.
Yeah.
Whereas others might just be like, otherwise we can't expand and exploit all the resources.
Right.
Hetzel's also got something else that is very new to the galaxy, and that is Bacta.
Yeah.
And Bacta is such an important healing chemical in the world of Star Wars. So Hetzel is even more important than just being a ton of people. In addition to Avar Kriss being nearby, Bel Zettifar, Loden Greatstorm, Indira Stokes, and Porter Engle, who typically are hanging out on Elfrona.
Yep. Where they're stationed.
Which is not super far from Hetzel system, go over to help as well. And they, like, they're boots on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
While Avar Kriss is like, we've got to stop these things flying at the planet. They're the ones who are going, we need to move in case they don't do it.
Yeah.
So they're on the ground and they're dealing with people. And it's kind of a nice lesson of how are the Jedi handling bad faith actors in society.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've got a compound that has a bunch of ships that could free and save a bunch of people from utter disaster.
And they're not.
And they're not doing it. They even have guards stationed outside.
Yeah.
And you kind of get to see that Loden Greatstorm is extremely patient and extremely disciplined in how he handles
It's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
crappy people.
Yeah.
Certainly more patient than I am. Bel is like, we can't just let them do this. And he's like, hey, we're not pulling out lightsabers just yet.
Yeah. Let's see what we can do.
Let's see what we can talk them into. And then people start doing bad stuff. They pull out a gun and Loden's like, okay, you wanted badass Jedi. You get to fight badass Jedi.
Yeah.
I tried to give you consequences. I talked to you. You knew what the consequences were. And then you did it anyway. Your actions are telling me that you just want to get to those consequences sooner. And that involves your arms getting chopped off. Loden Greatstorm gets to be a badass Jedi, and it's awesome. Then
so good. We
up
like
in
him.
space, Avar Kriss is trying to stop things, and that involves this weird cable system that I don't fully understand, where they're launching cables and they're trying to stop these light speed things from moving, but they have to launch them very specifically.
Yeah.
So she's having to become very in tune with the Force as she's doing this, but she's also got civilians that are also participating. So she's like kind of having the other Jedi guide this. I think Burryaga and Nibasik are in that pool.
Yes. Yeah.
And Burryaga, if you don't know, is an awesome Wookiee Jedi.
One of my favorites.
Wookiee Jedi. And his little old lady who like helps him out. I don't know if you've ever seen Yu Yu Hakusho, but the voice of Frieza voices a little old lady who is like very awesome in Yu Yu Hakusho and has like super kung fu power kind of things.
Yeah.
That's who I imagine every time I see Nibasik. I'll show you the picture later.
Yeah.
She's just like, yeah, I'm afraid of you, but you know, she's like Master Roshi.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, with
less pervy.
Well, yeah. So Burryaga and Nibasik and a bunch of other Jedi, they're all stopping light speed emergencies, and they basically do it. And it works. They stop most of them from hitting. I think there is impact of little things.
7 pieces from the Legacy run appear in the system. 6 go through the system, don't hit anything, but 1 hits Ab Dalis.
Ab Dalis, yes. Okay, so there were 2 things. They thought they could ignore several pieces because they were going to slow down and they were just going to hit asteroid fields, etc.
Yeah.
But there was one that had a bunch of Tabana gas pressurized on it.
That's what it would do.
And they needed to stop that before it hit a sun. Because if the Tabana gas in that capacity at that pressurization hit the sun, it risked the sun going supernova. And then it wouldn't matter what they saved. That's when Avar Kriss's, for lack of a better term, battle meditation really comes into play. Because that's when she starts going, I need any Jedi that can hear this. I don't care what planet you're on. We need to spirit bomb. They all lend their force energy out, and several die from the exertion. One collapses and falls off the edge of a building after saving a bunch of people. Some of them just don't wake up from the utter exhaustion of giving everything they can to try to stop this thing and lend their power of the Force.
Size matters not, but very
Speed
fast
certainly
things.
does.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So then we get to the Nile and a couple days later. So the first emergence comes out. That's the chunks of the Legacy Run, but that's only 7 chunks of the Legacy Run. Then there's other emergences.
Yeah.
So they stop all the stuff with the sun, and one gets through that they still miss, that they're like, that's fine. And it winds up hitting Ab Dalis.
Yeah.
But because the Jedi are so exerted, they're so overspent from stopping this thing from destroying an entire system, they kind of just miss the other one.
Mm-hmm.
And it winds up killing
Hits a city and kills 20 million people.
20 million people. Yeah. That's rough. And then it's kind of over for the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then more emergencies start coming out.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, the rest of the ship is still coming out of hyperspace, but because it's hyperspace, it could be happening 10, 15 systems over.
Yeah. The way I kind of figured is like it exploded and then fanned out, and just the first couple things to get hit were planets that were close to the system itself, to the planet.
Yeah.
And then all these other emergencies that end up coming out are planets further out in the outer rim.
Right. But they're also coming out of hyperspace
Yes.
later.
So still, yeah.
So they're not even visible.
No.
So
They
they
can't
don't,
track
which makes it impossible because there's no hyperspace tracking. Because
Right,
hyperspace tracking makes no sense.
No. Now that they're coming out at just under light speed, that's when they start really picking them up. Like something really fast just came out of hyperspace and it's not slowing down. What is going on?
Yeah. And that's when Lina So tasks the Jedi with figuring this problem out. So the whole next half of the book is we need to solve this so that this doesn't keep happening.
Yeah.
Because at any moment,
But also, like,
more of these could come out. We might not be
why
able to
did
help.
it happen? And how did it happen?
yeah.
And the Jedi are like, we'll look into that too.
Yeah. She tasks Yariel Poof with trying to figure out what caused this, and then Avar and Elzar go to the Santecas, and the Santecas
Naboo?
are very dicey about how they
They're
give this
cool
information.
about it, but they're also like, they got something going on behind the scenes that they're not
Elzar's
telling the
very
Jedi.
much, they're lying. Something's missing. And Avar's like, trying to maintain the peace, please. And they wind up getting a hold of a guy named Kevin Tarr. And Kevin is a genius. And Kevin links together a bunch of droids. Like every Navidroid. They're
Those
stripping
really cool.
ships like crazy. And they are basically creating a supercomputer.
Yeah.
And that supercomputer is made of so many droids that you're like walking among them to keep track of what's happening. And some of them start burning out, but he essentially creates a giant circuit board of Navicomputers and droids and Navidroids, which is when weird stuff happens with Elzar, because Elzar is known for experimenting with the Force. That Elzar's like, hey, I have an idea to cool this area, but it's going to require some meteorological knowledge. And I thought this was so cool, because then he becomes Storm, and I am Elzar Man, mistress of the elements. So he and Avar sit down, start meditating together. She uses kind of her, we're going to be in sync, but they're in sync already because they have history. And they work to manipulate the Force well enough to change the weather.
That's so in sync.
Everyone's like, who's going to keep this Navidroid array from burning? And the two of them together are like, it's gonna be me.
Ooh, good work.
And then they do. They they use the weather essentially as a cooling system.
Yeah.
And they can't control the weather for very long, and it wears them out because obviously you're moving air and blowing things, and you have to kind of understand how weather works. But thankfully, Elzar Man is all about
Science
and hyperfocus. So they cool the droids well enough that they can start calculating, okay, we're going to have emergencies at this point, at this point, at this point, at this point. And then effectively they've made this insane hyperspace sort of tracking system.
Yeah.
If we know where this was and we know the trajectory that these are going, we should be able to predict almost every single piece flying out of hyperspace.
Mathematical.
Yeah. So then they predict it, and
everything is just fine.
everything's a-okay. No, we still
that's not
have
how
we
that
still
works.
have the
That's
Nile.
not how Star
so
Wars
the Nile
works.
are celebrating.
Yeah.
They're off and they're just like, woo, hanging out in no space, which is a super cool platform. And there's Lorna D, Kassav, Miliki, and a Doatan named Panada. And they are the 3 Tempest runners. They are currently working under Markion Ro, the Eye of the Storm. And he's celebrating with all of them that they have effectively done this. And the Jedi do not know this. The first half of this book is just a disaster book.
Oh, yeah.
You don't know what came out of
Stuff's-
space and hit the legacy
Stuff's
run.
going wrong left and right. Everybody's freaking out. And yeah, it's chaos.
Yeah. And so while you're dealing with some weird version of Armageddon meets Deep Impact meets
Event Horizon
meets Dante's Peak. While you're dealing with all that, there's, machinations in the shadows.
Yeah.
So the Nile, they're nihilists, and
Your pirates out around the unknown regions and
unknown regions and Outer Rim.
Yeah, Outer Rim.
They wear gas masks. We've talked about them before on the podcast. You should definitely listen to those episodes because we talk about their whole power structure.
Yep.
But they're out there. They're celebrating and they're excited because they've done it. They have shown the Republic that they are not invincible. And then the Eye is very cagey about what comes next. But we start to understand that they have access to the paths.
Yeah.
And we don't really know what the paths are at this time.
Not
but
really.
they can move in and out of hyperspace in weird ways, which means that they can move into a hyperspace lane right where a ship like the Legacy Run, which is making regular trips, is going to be.
Oh, no.
And that's how the Legacy Run blew up. Oh, man. And the Jedi don't really know why. Meanwhile, over on Elfrona, Porter Engel's making 9-egg stew.
Oh, yeah.
And Loden Greatstorm is pushing his Padawan off a cliff. As you do.
As you do.
Loden Greatstorm is training Bell to land, doing force landing. Hey, when you're falling, you got to stop yourself with the force. Hooray. So Loden Greatstorm is pushing him off, and he's like, you got to catch yourself.
And he kind of didn't.
And he didn't. No, Loden Greatstorm has to keep on saving him. But he's like, hey, as soon as you figure that out, you're basically ready to be a knight. So get your stuff together, Bell. Loden Greatstorm and Bell have a very, very cool, friendly relationship. It's not really quite Obi-Wan and Anakin. It's probably more like Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan because their
Later
age
on,
difference
yeah.
is a little bit better. Like what you see in the prequels, not necessarily what you saw in the books.
Yeah.
But because Obi-Wan and Anakin are basically brothers, they're not father and son.
No.
Not the way that Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan kind of were. So they're off doing their thing when a bunch of Nihil Raiders show up. And now we are seeing the Nihil on the ground. Up until then, this has been a disaster book.
Yeah.
Now we have these pirate raiders. So we go to the Blythe compound. We're going to go take care of them. During the course of this action, we lose Loden Greatstorm. His ship goes down, and no one really knows what happened to him. And you're not going to know for a while.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, we lost Loden. That's so sad. And Bell's like, I didn't see the body. I know how this works.
He's my master. I would have felt it. And everybody's like, bruh, he's gone. Just deal with it.
Yeah. And in later books, he even has conversations with other Jedi who have lost their masters. And they're like, yeah, you would have felt it.
No, you would absolutely would have felt that.
You'd know. You'd know.
You'd know, bro. You'd know.
That's a direct Stellan Geos quote.
Yes.
You know. You know. Anyway, so the Nihil are now mounting their offensive. There is somebody named Kassav. He's one of the 3 Tempest runners. Kassav decides, well, I know where the next big emergence is allegedly going to be. So why don't I go and ransom them?
Oh, yeah.
So he goes out there and he's like, hey, you pay me this many credits and we'll stop an emergence from coming through. And they're like, we don't negotiate with terrorists.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, you should, or we're not going to be able to. Oh, shoot, there it goes. Because he doesn't calculate it very well.
No.
And people get hurt because we still haven't quite calculated the Navidroid thing. So Kassav screws up and the Eye is livid. And
because he told not to go.
Told him specifically, you cannot go do this thing. Kassav.
Kassav's like, okay, cool, whatever you say. Bye.
And Markion Ro's like, I'm pretty sure you killed my dad, so you get hurt, I don't really care. So then we start to stop emergencies, and we can predict them, and we're shooting things out of the sky, and then we have a little bit of an issue because we go to shoot something out of the sky, and then Burryaga goes, wait,
Yeah.
we can't shoot those guys out of the sky. There's people in there.
But he can't quite say it like that because he's a Wookiee.
Because he's a Wookiee. So instead he goes, and
everybody's like, what's Nib? Like, what's up with your
she's
dude?
like, I don't know. I've never understood him. I pretend I do. And no, Nib is like, he's saying there's people on board.
Yeah, because he can feel their fear and their he can feel them.
Yeah.
And he's like, something's
Buryaga's
not right.
very in tune with people.
In fact, he got taken out of a mission because he kept feeling everybody else's feelings too much, and it was affecting the way he was flying his ship, and he almost became a liability.
Yeah. So he tells them, hey, that chunk of the Legacy run flying through right now is full of people flying at crazy speeds.
Mm-hmm.
And so they do what they do. They save them using some crazy cable technique that I don't entirely understand, using Joss and Pika, Adrian doing their cool thing. And in saving them, we now have survivors of the Legacy run to go, what happened?
Yeah, what happened?
And so that little rambunctious boy from the beginning, turns out he didn't die. Except now he feels horribly guilty because he thinks he offset the navigation system because when everything went down, he had taken over part of the comm.
Yeah, to watch some sort of hollow
He was mad.
Hollow movie.
He was mad that she had gotten him in trouble and he had put his face up on the hollow in front of the captain just before it goes down, which gave him an opportunity to see out the viewport through the hollow. And he saw the 3 slashes from the Nile ship.
Yeah.
And he's like, that thing that hit us had 3 slashes on it. And then they do a little bit of math and they're like, oh, the Nile.
That sounds familiar.
We should probably deal with them. Then comes the Battle of Kur. And that's where we get Skier and a whole battle with Jedi vectors. And Jorah Mali is there and she's flirting with Skier, which is pretty dang cool if I do say so myself. And we can talk more about Jedi and how much they flirt in another podcast because we do want to address that.
We will.
But there is like this whole battle and Kassav is kind of leading the charge in it. And we can tell throughout the whole book that Mark Yonro does not like the Tempest Runners. He does not trust them. He thinks that one of them is responsible for the death of his father, which we don't really know exactly the conditions that led to the death of his dad.
Yet.
But we know that there's something amiss there.
Yeah.
And so he thinks Kassav did it. And so he's like, yeah, Kassav, you go lead the charge. And then he doesn't provide Kassav with backup.
Right.
But then when the tide is turning in the favor of the Jedi, Kassav is like, we don't know what to do, yada, yada, yada. There's a whole bunch of other Nihil there. And then Marchion Ro says, here, I'm sending you new paths. And this is kind of the first time we see just how good the path engines are.
Right.
And
what exactly they do.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Because until then, it's still this very weird thing. Like, how did they appear right next to the Legacy run in hyperspace, in the hyperspace lane? I mean, they're fighting dirty. They're releasing radiation. People are dying in the worst ways. You're seeing arguably some of the nastiest tactics.
It's pretty messed up.
Like Clone Wars is full of war crimes.
Well, this is
nowhere near the level. Like faking a surrender to a bunch of droids does not come near using chemical weapons in a space battle, like irradiating the area to ruin things. And then when the tide's about to be like fully turned in the favor of the Jedi, the path engines start launching the ships within like half a mile of each other, and they're just bouncing all around within that same area of space.
They're flashing in and out and jumping
they're basically
back and
just
forth
disappearing and reappearing. It's like Goku's instant transmission. Basically, if he was to just do it all around in the fight. And then they start like, what's the word? I don't want to use warping because that's obviously wrong. They start basically hyperspace jumping into ships.
Yeah.
And effectively doing a bunch of holdo maneuvers because of this special engine that they have, because of this special code that he has because of Marchion Ro's old lady that hangs out with him.
Yeah. And meanwhile, Avar Kriss and her battle meditation are like, it's throwing them off.
It is, because they're all terrified.
Because they're like, what is this? No one fights like this. And they're not used to that.
Backed into a corner. They're a wild animal backed into a corner, for sure. So the battle goes on. Kassav definitely dies, which Marchion Ro kind of thinks to himself, I'm pretty sure he killed my dad. But if he didn't, I'll get to Lorna D and Pan Eta eventually. So one down. At least he's out of the way. Jorah Mali dies tragically, which really sucks because I loved her reaction with Skier. And Skier loses an arm.
That was brutal.
So then what happens in No Space?
Yeah, so after the battle's over, the Nihil make it seem like the Jedi kind of won.
Yeah, the whole galaxy's
yeah,
kind of convinced that, okay, this threat's done.
Yeah, and Avar, with all the crazy jumping in and out of hyperspace with the path engines things that are kind of throwing them off, she finally kind of gets everybody back under control. Not under control, but on the same page,
Sure.
Jedi mind meld wise. And then, yeah, so mid-battle, Marchion Ro is like giving them the paths and just ways to go. And they're like, hey, trust these paths and it'll take you where you need to go. It'll make the battle way easier and we'll come out on top. But the paths end up going in all sorts of random places.
Yeah.
And that's when a lot of the ship-into-ship crashes happen. And
yeah, this isn't a kamikaze maneuver on purpose.
No.
They're just being used as giant
fodder.
cannonballs.
Yeah. So eventually the Jedi win and Kosov kind of starts figuring things out a little bit. He's like, hey, something's not right here. And so he orders his crew to disconnect his path engine because he realizes he could be next and he wants to survive.
He doesn't know because the input is there, and so it's kind of automatic.
Yeah. But Kosov realizes that Marchion Ro is really starting to take over everything, and that the Nihil themselves is kind of a I want to say disbanded. They just haven't fully joined up yet, but they still rely on Marchion Ro's paths that he's getting from Ms. Zanteca. So he's like, something's not right. I don't trust this guy, but let me see what else I could do. So he makes a deal with a governor that's around there.
Kosov tries to cut a deal, and they don't believe him, and they shoot him on the spot.
Yeah, basically.
So Kosov dies. The battle is won.
There are heavy losses on both sides, but the Jedi won the battle, basically.
Yeah, and the Jedi, I'm pretty sure, are fairly present at this one because this was kind of a combo of Republic and Jedi coming together to last stand against this group that's this up and coming group that's trying to show up.
Yeah,
and so they see this massive group. They see them playing all these dirty tactics. Several people wind up dying who you've been introduced to throughout the books. And then the Nihil go home and they celebrate.
Yeah.
Because the Nihil, even though they've lost a bunch of people, have just scared the Jedi and the Republic and made an impression. And the Jedi, while they do think, oh, we've won, or we've severely hurt these people, they're also...
They don't know about the other Tempest runners or the Nihil in general, that there's way more of them.
They don't know what they don't know. And I think the Jedi recognize that for the most part, except for certain council members
and
that I don't like.
Yeah, they don't want to really acknowledge it. They're like in denial. They don't want to go and research more. They're like, oh no, they'll just all of them at that one battle and
it'll sort itself
out, yeah.
Or the Republic's view of it's a frontier problem.
Yeah.
That's happening out in the wild space.
Yeah.
That's why they call it wild space. Meanwhile, on No Space, they're having a huge party. Even though Kosov is dead, a bunch of Kosov's Tempests that did manage to survive, which there aren't a lot of them, but they, get absorbed into other Tempests. And Marchion Ro does his big Marchion Ro speech where he basically goes from, I'm your benefactor who gives you these paths, to I am the leader of this group.
Yes. I am your leader, and I'm going to be their leader. Time to go mess stuff up.
In The Force Awakens, when Hux gives his great speech, and all of these people, and you realize just how many there are. Just imagine that, but they're all drunk, and they're all partying.
Yes.
So that at a rave, on a platform, floating in space, surrounded by a force field bubble.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
Yeah.
But that's the moment that Lorna D realizes that she needs to play politics.
Right. She realizes that Marchion Ro is way more dangerous than she's been led to believe by Marchion himself.
Yeah.
He's definitely playing chess and everybody else is playing checkers.
And I love the way that he's voiced. I mention this all the time, obviously, because he's I'm choosing my words to be the ones absolutely necessary. And that's kind of it, right?
Yeah.
But it also makes him sound weak. Until he starts to talk like this. He takes off his mask. He starts screaming at the crowd. And you're like, oh, your weak little milquetoast boy is really scary. And that's when Lorna D goes, I got to play my cards right. And she can give him a gift, which she happened to get on Elfrona. And that gift is what actually happened when Loden Greatstorm fell.
Yeah. He got taken.
He is kidnapped.
Yeah. So they have his lightsaber, and Lorna D gifts Marchion Ro his lightsaber.
Yeah. Like, what a gift. Like,
Yeah.
hey, you hate the Jedi. And Marchion Ro in his speech is very clear. He hates Chancellor So. He hates the Jedi. And he hates the Republic.
Yeah.
And right there, there's talk here and there of what are his motivations. Exactly why he does is still nebulous, enigmatic, whatever. But exactly what he hates and what he's against is very clear.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that moment in this book,
Yeah.
the best moment of phase 1, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
That was the moment where I was just like, I love this man. I love this bad guy. This is the best bad guy we've seen in recent Star Wars since Grand Admiral Thrawn.
And he's not even a Force user.
Not even a Force user. He's just so smart and so methodical. And unfortunately, I think his ego is a little bit stronger than Thrawn. Yeah. Which will eventually become a problem. And that's like one of those things that's one of those tropes where it's like, oh, your weakness is that you're cocky. Like, that gets frustrating sometimes. But I feel like he's smart enough to be... I feel like this entire phase, he just has so many moments of outsmarting the people who think they've got one over on him.
Yeah.
And Thrawn doesn't have a lot of people constantly trying to undermine him.
No.
Whereas
everybody knows.
All the Nihil are like finding ways to try to undermine him or
because that's what they do in general anyways.
Him. Yeah, because they're all sneaky bastards.
Mm-hmm.
But he is... chef's kiss. Anyway, I love Marchion Ro. It's one of the first times I've read a character and instantly been like, I have to cosplay this man, because I don't really do cosplay, but like, I put that fur on my shoulders and file my teeth to points.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so all that happens in no space. What happens after that?
Yeah. So Marchion ends up talking to Loden.
Oh, the conversation with Loden does happen in this book.
Yes.
Thank God. Okay, I wanted to talk about it, but I wasn't sure.
Definitely, yeah, it's there, and there's little hints to things that happen in phase 2, but also Loden tries to mind trick Marchion Ro, just try to get out, and he's like, no, you can't try Jedi mind tricks on me. Like, Grandma taught me how to like prevent that from happening.
Yeah.
So this whole thing kind of goes back generations, like his family's hate of the Jedi.
Yeah. And he alludes to there being history.
Yes.
Though he doesn't really give much away.
Right.
Can we talk for a moment about how he chooses to torture Loden Greatstorm, though?
Sure.
Because, again, chef's kiss.
Yeah.
Loden Greatstorm does not get tortured because Jedi have various things to avoid feeling that pain and kind of zenning themselves out. However, they are very susceptible to empathy. Mm-hmm. And so to keep him from being able to focus, Marchion Ro tortures people in cells surrounding him, all simultaneously, barely keeping them alive, so that the anguish and pain and fear and horror is everywhere.
Torture. Yeah.
And it makes it so that when he does want to torture Loden Greatstorm, he does not have the mental faculties to handle it because he's too busy trying to
tune everybody else out,
which he doesn't want to do because
he's a Jedi.
It's like
it's evil as hell.
And it's one of those moments where you go, oh, this guy knows his enemy.
Yeah.
Like Art of War, know your enemy. This guy knows his enemy.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
So cool.
So that chapter ends. Finishes up. And then we smash cut to the Starlight Beacon.
Oh, yeah.
Because the dedication ceremony is about to start.
Yeah, but before we get to the dedication ceremony, because everything's going to lead to the dedication ceremony, except for High Republic Adventures. If you listen to our last episode, you realize that happened. What happens leading up to it in the High Republic comics? Ooh. That's our introduction to Keeve Trennis.
Yes. Yeah. So, bouncing over to the comics.
Meanwhile,
it's the first issue, and Keeve Trennis and Skier are on a planet training. Skier is Sans arm, but relatively healthy after the battle occurred.
Sans arm?
Oh, it was right there. After a quick little lightsaber duel, Keeve's like, why are we doing this? I should be training for my trials. And Skier's like, dude, why do you think we're here? Like, yeah, gasp, this is the trial. Turn the page, and it's the big old High Republic, splash page of the title. And then Skier says, these huge, tall needles have stood for a couple millennia. but I put a Tythonian pendant at the top of one of the peaks. So, Tython, if you remember from Mandalorian, is an old Jedi planet.
Oh.
Yeah, so some nice little tie-ins, but Tython
cool.
came from the expanded universe in the Dawn of the Jedi comics. And
Cool.
Tython is like the main planet that the Jedi
Yeah.
are training on. So, love little sprinkles of
Heck yeah.
EU stuff in there. Anyways,
So it is go to the top of the pillar and get the ball.
and get the thing. Yeah.
It's Jedi
Yeah.
global guts.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So Skier's Mike O'Malley.
Go over to Mo.
Yeah.
Yes, Skier, we're going to watch these people go up this little hill here, and oh no, there's insectoids in the way. That's my best impression of Mo. I haven't heard Global Guts in probably 15 years.
Pretty
My
solid.
apologies to Mo.
So, of course, it doesn't go as planned because they never go as planned.
No.
And that's when you see our insectoid friends. But then there's a huge like swarm of these other insects flying, and they're actually probably going to take out the insectoids' little community. Now Keeve has to go and prevent this from happening while also still trying to get the pendant and, making things happen.
She's not supposed to like land on the ground or something like that.
Yes. Right. Now, it's just kind of like make it
Don't
happen.
fall in the ball pit.
Yeah.
No, not at all. No, she just has to get up there.
Yeah. But then we flash over to the Starlight Beacon to our good homies Estalamaru and Avar Chris.
I love Estalamaru. He's so underappreciated. I
So
feel like.
freaking cool. And he's sitting there like half meditating, but also half floating, but taking care of.
He's the man in the chair.
Yeah.
Without
Yeah.
a chair. He's
There
the
is
man in the crisscross applesauce.
Yeah.
And something, I don't know if it's mentioned at that point in the book yet, but Jorah Mali was supposed to be the Marshal of Starlight Beacon, and now that duty has been
Yes.
passed and on to Avar Chris.
Right. She was offered it. She took it. So now she's in charge of the Jedi stuff on Starlight Beacon.
Yeah.
Because it's a half Jedi temple, half Republic outpost.
Right.
And traveling.
I was honestly a little disappointed when I found out that she was going to be there because I loved her so much in Light of the Jedi, and I didn't want her relegated to just this one space.
Yeah.
I think it worked out really well,
Yeah.
given everything that happened.
May or may not have happened like that.
But once we get to Into the Dark, that'll make a lot more sense.
Yeah. No, totally.
But I remember being like, oh, but I want her to hang out with Elzar Mann and Stellan Geos more.
Yeah.
Like, I want to see those three together. That'll
Yeah.
be fun.
Right? So then we get a nice little visit from the Grandmasters Veter and Yoda.
Oh, yeah, Prav Vader.
Yeah. Pratri Veter. Yeah, so they show up for a quick second.
We're on
because,
a nickname basis. I call him
well,
Pra.
Pra. Classic Pra.
Dude, Pra. What are you doing? Get over here, Pra. Pra.
This is where they offer Avar Chris the Marshal of Starlight Beacon job.
Oh,
Yeah.
so it happens in the book. It happens in the comic book for sure.
Yes,
Cool.
definitely.
And then they go to the ceremony because that first book ends at the ceremony, right?
Yeah.
Because I read that book before I read Light of the Jedi.
Oh, right.
Because you had originally like dropped the stack for me to read, and then I was like,
And it was
no, I'm
before,
going to
yeah.
read everything, Brian. Everything.
So Keeve kind of messages the Starlight Beacon like, hey, there's some stuff going down over here. We might need some help. And Estalamaru is like, I got a whole bunch of things going on, plus everybody's arriving. You kind of have to like take things as you are over there. Like, we can't really send anybody, but you should be able to handle them. So Keeve ends up doing like a battle meditation for herself, taps into the Force, and she can kind of see things going on. She can also even feel what's going on the Starlight Beacon, which is really cool. And she handles business like a boss.
She's connected.
Yeah. She leads the big old swarm of insects away, and then she ends up helping out, repairing things.
She does a bunch of good Jedi work
Basically,
instead
yeah.
of finishing her Global Guts challenge.
Yeah, yeah.
And Almec is pissed.
Yeah. Wrong show.
I know. I'm fully
It's
aware.
all connected.
No,
it's all connected.
Dude, everyone knows that Global Guts and Legends of the Hidden Temple are in the same universe.
Yeah. Eventually, the day is saved. She didn't get the pendant. They go back to the Starlight Beacon. And, of course, on the way, Skier's kind of relaying everything that's been going on, what's happened. And Keeve's kind of bummed, like, I didn't pass my trial. Like, what's going on? So they finally meet up with Avar Chris, and Keeve's like, oh my God, Avar Chris.
Yeah, she's kind of got some starstruck.
Yeah, fangirling a little bit. And she's like, well, this happened, but this didn't happen. And, these people are in danger, but, like, I could do the test again. You want me to do the test again? I'll do the test again. And here where Chris is like, are you good? Are you done? Breathe. Okay. And then boom, knights are right on the spot.
Boom. Chop that Padawan braid.
And then later is the dedication ceremony. And we get shots of so many people from the books and the comics, both that we've seen before and we haven't seen before. And then it ends with a for light and a life.
For light and life.
And everybody's raising their sabers up in the air.
Which is also how Light of the Jedi ends.
Yeah.
Meanwhile,
Skier goes back to his room and he's like, no, this doesn't feel right again. Oh, no. And all of a sudden, something's wrong with Skier.
What's wrong with Skier?
We don't know.
Why is he so afraid? Why is he so scared? What's he so mad about?
I don't know.
We don't know. It takes a while to find out. What's going on? I'm worried about him. I'm worried about Skier, Brian.
We're all worried about Skier.
If you or a loved one is currently worried about Skier, get on board, because we're all a little concerned about what's going on with him.
The train's rolling quick.
Yeah.
And I think that about covers it for this episode.
I think so too.
Yeah, because there's a lot. So you know what? We're going to just do more episodes.
I mean, breaking down each arc into its coinciding book arc and where the comics kind of fit in with that allows us to get a lot more detail out for these recaps. So the next episode, we can do High Republic Adventures and the Tales of Villainy Star Wars adventure going into the events that happen in Into the Dark.
Yeah.
Which, while not directly related, they are happening concurrently, which then leads us into a whole bunch of other stuff going on in the comics, which will then eventually lead us into Test of Courage.
Yeah. And even though Test of Courage kind of happens at around the same points of some of the other stuff, it makes sense just to cover a little bit later.
Yeah, and with Test of Courage, we can go out the rest of the way with the Wave 1 comics, and we'll do that in a third spoilery episode coming soon.
Yeah.
So we hope you guys enjoyed it. We hope you guys had a good time.
We sure did.
Yeah, we did. So do we have anything else you need to say?
Smash that like and subscribe button.
Make sure you follow us on our socials. We're on Threads. We're on Instagram. And really, we're just on those two. Like, we're not active on anything else.
No. That's a lot of stuff to do. And we got other stuff to do throughout the day. We got a whole other podcast.
That's a whole other podcast.
That is a whole other podcast. Oh.
Thank you for listening to the Starlight Archive. And in the words of Yariel Poof, peace without justice is flawed. Hollow at its core. It is peace provided by tyranny. The Starlight Archive is brought to you by Bryce Rankins and Brian Romero. It was edited by Bryce Rankins and Brian Romero. Bryce Rankins designed the logo. Brian Romero did most of the research. It's produced by Bryce Rankins and Brian Romero. And basically, it's just us. The Starlight Archive is brought to you by Sneaky Geek Media 2024. All rights reserved.